Story 1. Birds do not abandon their babies if a human touches them. That is incorrect. If you find a nestling, which is featherless or has very patchy feathers and is small, on the ground, it is okay to put it back in the nest. If you find a fledgling, which is fully feathered but looks awkward, leave it alone. However, if it is in immediate danger, it is okay to move it short distances. For example, I had to move a red-winged blackbird fledgling that was sitting in the middle of the road refusing to move. I moved it into the grass. Story 2. Goldfish do not have a 3-second memory. This is not true, and there is no reason it would be. Studies have shown they can form memories and retrieve them at least weeks later. Story 3. The idea that humans swallow many spiders in their sleep is not supported by evidence. It is unlikely that spiders would crawl into and be swallowed by a person. They tend to avoid hot, vibrating surfaces and the highly humid environment inside the mouth. Story 4. Lobsters do not feel pain. This is often cited as justification for boiling them alive for eating, while animal cruelty regulations mean that it would never be acceptable to do that to, for example, a chicken. It is now generally believed by the scientific community that lobsters do feel pain, which is why some countries are beginning to ban the process of boiling them alive. However, many are slow to catch on. Story 5. I have had multiple people tell me confidently that air conditioning only cools air 20 degrees cooler than the outside temperature, even though they are constantly in buildings cooled to 70 degrees when it is 100 degrees outside. This seems like a common excuse when air conditioning is not working somewhere. I heard people say this when I lived in Las Vegas. Story 6. Vitamin C cures or prevents colds. We need vitamin C to be healthy, but the myth that vitamin C specifically helps with colds was popularized by Linus Pauling. He was a well-respected scientist in other fields and a 2-time Nobel Prize winner, so many people trusted his opinion. However, by the time he promoted this idea, he was losing credibility and believed something that was not supported by evidence. There is no strong evidence that vitamin C specifically prevents or cures colds. While it is essential for health, taking extra vitamin C when you have a cold does not help. Consuming more than you need only results in expensive urine and may strain your kidneys. This myth is so common that many people become annoyed when it is disputed, so I usually let it go. Story 7. Corsets are not machines of oppression. More people nowadays are realizing that it is a common misconception that historically they were restrictive, painful, or harmful. In reality, most women wore them for everyday comfort and posture support. They are not any more oppressive than a modern bra, though some argue that both are products of misogyny. Extreme tight lacing was rare and often sensationalized, especially in later moralist or feminist critiques. For most, corsets were practical garments tailored to their bodies, not instruments of suffering. Hollywood actresses who have complained about corsets in the past often did not have a well-made corset for their body. Some had to wear theirs directly on their skin, while historically there was always a layer underneath because corsets were not washed frequently. Instead, the undergarment or chemise was replaced. Story 8. We can all work to retire at age 69 and beyond after having worked 50 years in physically demanding jobs. Story 9. 95% of dog trainers and handlers who use corrections, punishments, and alpha theory are just plain wrong and have been scientifically outdated for decades. However, they continue to spread outdated information out of habit, social bubbles, and often because it subconsciously feels good to dominate weaker beings. Story 10. Chiropractors are not pseudoscience or snake oil. I would not trust a chiropractor with my plastic Halloween skeleton. Story 11. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Personally, I feel more energetic and sharper without breakfast, and by noon I am hungry enough to enjoy the meal. If I do eat breakfast, I become sluggish and hungry again by mid-morning. Story 12. Love languages were created by a Christian self-help author without a psychology background. They originated from a marriage advice book. Story 13. Urine is sterile. It is only sterile in your bladder, not in your urinary tract. By the time it leaves your body, it is no longer sterile. Story 14. The only man-made structure visible from space is the Great Wall of China. There are massive cities. Story 15. Living in a cold country, I encounter many people online who believe the warm feeling from a shot or two of alcohol in cold weather means the alcohol is warming you up. This idea is somewhat reinforced by the classic image of a Saint Bernard rescue dog, which a British painter, unaware of the facts, once depicted carrying a small barrel of liqueur. Your body fine-tunes blood circulation based on temperature. In cold conditions, your face, for example, experiences reduced circulation. Pushing large amounts of blood to an exposed part of the body would be like acting as a radiator, heating the surrounding air and losing more heat energy than necessary to stay safe. Alcohol dilates veins that your body has smartly constricted, causing you to lose a considerable amount of heat. This works against your ability to stay warm in the following hours. Giving alcohol to a person with any level of hypothermia is like nudging them toward death rather than helping them, and it has the same negative effect even when hypothermia is not yet an issue. Norwegian expedition leader Fridtjof Nansen largely banned the use of alcohol on expeditions he led because he observed its excessive negative effects on people. Story 16. Menstrual cycle synchronization is not a real phenomenon. It is purely coincidental, considering there are only about 4 weeks in a month. Any evidence suggesting it occurs is anecdotal and supported only by confirmation bias. Story 17. Migraines are triggered by eating cheese or chocolate. This remains a popular accepted fact despite not being supported by evidence. From what I can tell, the belief goes back to a few small studies in the late 1960s and 1970s. Story 18. In the Middle Ages, some people supposedly practiced biphasic sleep. This idea originated from a few tenuous quotes cited by one individual who wrote a book on the subject. However, all sources trace back to this single author, and no other credible historians have addressed it. Much of the evidence involves casual mentions of waking up during the night. Many people do wake up randomly, sometimes getting a glass of water or checking their phone. This does not indicate a societal practice of biphasic sleep. Other evidence refers to first sleep and second sleep, which likely describe lighter and deeper sleep phases rather than distinct sleep sessions. If biphasic sleep were common, historical records would reflect it. Medieval people documented their lives extensively through various sources such as the book Montaigne, which uses Inquisition records to depict daily life in a French village, medical texts discussing insomnia, and criminal justice records. Criminal activity during the night and related witness accounts do not provide sufficient evidence for a fundamentally different sleep pattern. Monks, however, are known to have practiced segmented sleep, waking in the middle of the night to pray matins. This practice was considered a penance. Monastic rules required matins at midnight, though novices often struggled to stay awake. As rules became less strict in some abbeys, matins was shifted toward dawn and combined with lauds, reducing the need to rise at midnight. The term matins eventually replaced vigils, referring to morning prayer rather than nighttime wakefulness. This detailed monastic practice stands in contrast to the idea that ordinary people commonly woke at 1 a.m. to visit neighbors or engage in other activities. Story 19. The belief that people are putting needles or sharp objects in children's Halloween candy dates back to the Industrial Revolution. In reality, it is very rare. Story 20. Our brains are not fully developed until age 26. Neuroscientists explicitly reject this, so I am not entirely sure what the origin of this idea is. Story 21. The Spanish Inquisition was largely a myth. This is a well-accepted fact, but the popular belief that it happened persists. It did exist, but not like the stories. It was the only court that could hold clergy, nobility, and wealthy members of society accountable. When the Spanish started to migrate to parts of Italy, the Italians essentially created the myth as a racist mantra. Also, churches did not suppress books and knowledge as they are often portrayed. Catholics established one of the oldest still operating scientific communities in the world, and they were only upset with Galileo for publishing without waiting for peer review. They were on track to confirm his findings and help him publish, not insisting that the Earth had to be the center of the universe. This is well documented, including how the common misconception arose. The misconception was essentially that Galileo was someone who wanted to market himself, so he fabricated the scandal to gain attention, betraying his fellow Catholic Church-funded researchers in the process. Story 22. You need to use the Leidenfrost effect to prevent food from sticking to a pan, especially eggs. The temperature needed to achieve that is really high, and the common explanation given by chefs makes no sense. They say the vapor layer causes the food not to stick, similar to how it makes water droplets float on the pan. But what happens the moment food hits the pan? The pan rapidly cools down and your food sticks. Also, why would you need to use oil at all if the Leidenfrost effect is going to keep your food unstuck the whole time? I think what's happening is that the crust it forms doesn't stick, and that the crust forms quicker on a hotter pan. I saw an egg cooking tutorial where they say you have to heat up a pan until the water beads to fry an egg. Directly afterward, they give an alternative way to slowly fry an egg on low heat, and it doesn't stick. That was enough proof to me that the Leidenfrost hype is false in the cooking community. Story 23. Bulls are enraged by the color red, which is why matadors always have red capes or flags to taunt them. That is incorrect, as bulls are colorblind. It is the movement that attracts them, not the color. Story 24. If you want to lose weight, the most important factor is diet. Exercise offers many other health benefits. Story 25. Myth. Eating turkey makes you sleepy because of the amino acid tryptophan it contains. Chicken contains approximately the same amount, while soybeans and oatmeal have more. This is why people get sleepy at Thanksgiving. Fact. It is not the tryptophan, but the crash after eating lots of carbohydrate-rich foods and sometimes alcohol. The body slows down to digest and metabolize all the food that people overindulge in on Thanksgiving. Story 26. Be very suspicious of any fact that includes the number 7. Gum stays in your stomach for 7 years? Of course not. How would that even work? It will either cause a bowel obstruction or pass through your system like anything else. Cells and atoms are replaced every 7 years. Now, some cell lines last for life, such as neurons. The average person eats 7 spiders a year in their sleep. Just because there are many spiders in the world does not mean they crawl into your mouth every 2 months. Story 27. Fans only move hot air around, so they are pointless. Now, this reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of how cooling works. It is true, and it is exactly what you want if you do not have air conditioning on a hot day. Evaporation works by increasing temperature or air current. Of course, humidity needs to be acceptable. Story 28. My ex-pest control technician from Terminix told me that the daddy long legs in my garage are the most venomous spiders in the world, but their mouths are too small or weak to harm you. 1. Daddy long legs are not spiders. They are harvestmen in the United States. 2. My garage had cellar spiders, not daddy long legs. 3. Spiders are venomous, not poisonous. 4. Cellar spiders are not the most venomous spiders in the world. I did not believe this when I was 8 years old, and I cannot believe there are adults who still believe it, especially someone who is supposed to be a professional. This technician also set bait traps for a vole in my yard. A substitute pest control technician later told me those traps do not work on voles. I ended up taking care of the vole myself. Story 29. All white people in the 1800s were white supremacists. I am a 19th century United States historian, and I can assure you this claim is completely wrong. Story 30. The whole humans only use 10% of their brain. Myth has been debunked many times. Brain imaging shows activity throughout the brain, even when we are resting. It is nonsense used to downplay how complex our brains really are. Story 31. Pigeons are not dirty animals and do not spread diseases. Completely wrong. Pigeons love to bathe and preen almost constantly to keep their feathers flight-worthy. Although pigeons can catch illnesses, they are not a vector, and there is no record or document showing humans actually contracting diseases from pigeons. Do not believe me? Millions of pigeons live in cities worldwide, in close proximity to humans. If they could pass diseases, the human race would have been wiped out entirely several times over. Pigeons mate for life. Both male and female take shifts caring for their young. Both produce crop milk to feed their young. They preen and feed each other to strengthen their bonds. Pigeons are the symbol of God's messengers, and rightly so. They are the embodiment of love and peace. They just poop a lot, but so do you. Story 32. Circumcision is healthier than being uncircumcised. Some people justify genital mutilation as a religious practice, but then support it with claims that removing the foreskin is healthy. This practice is cruel. Story 33. A good way to prevent bullying in school is to have stricter rules, less freedom, or stronger punishment for bullies. Story 34. Well, I used to think the quote about using only 10% of your brain was true. Now that I am older and have worked with people, I am sure it is accurate. Story 35. Carrots are good for your eyesight. This was British propaganda from World War II to explain why their fighter pilots were so successful. The truth was they were using radar. Story 36. The cervix does not have pain receptors. This fact is accepted by the majority of the medical community and is based on an outdated study. While this may be true for some women who do not require pain medication and do not react, a very large percentage of women experience significant pain in their cervix. Many intrauterine devices and biopsies are performed without adequate pain management, other than the recommendation to take acetaminophen, which is inadequate and inhumane. My cervical biopsy was the single most painful experience of my life, and I have been through a lot. The pain was so intense that I passed out and vomited. Story 37. Wolf packs are led by female wolves. The idea of survival of the fittest does not apply. Wolves and other canines have matriarchal social structures. Story 38. The United States is too big for high-speed rail networks. This is the country that built the Transcontinental Railroad in 6 years in the mid-1800s. This is the country that was built on a robust freight and passenger rail network. Europe is covered by high-speed rail. China built massive high-speed rail networks in under a decade, crossing a landmass larger and more spread out than the United States, with much more inhospitable terrain in its western two-thirds. And before anyone argues, but China's population is mostly in the eastern part of the country, they built a 1,776-kilometer high-speed rail line connecting Lanzhou to Urumqi. Too big. My ass. Story 39. Carrots do not improve eyesight. This was propaganda spread by the British in World War II to cover the fact that they started using radar. Story 40. Deoxygenated blood in your body is blue. I have met many professional nurses and even doctors who swear this is true. Story 41. That saying person and I is correct. Example, give the ball to Beavis and I is wrong because you would not say give the ball to I. It is give the ball to Beavis and me. Correct? Itchy and I are going to the store. Correct? Give the damn ball to Scratchy and me. Story 42. Bigfoot does not exist. Mark my words, the ongoing North Carolina University deoxyribonucleic acid study will find unknown great ape deoxyribonucleic acid. Story 43. The fact that everyone says all facts are true is incorrect. Facts are considered true until they are proven false. For example, we accepted the fact that the sun went around the earth until Galileo proved that the earth went around the sun. Then that fact was false. Story 44. Cracking your knuckles does not cause arthritis. Multiple studies show that the sound is caused by gas bubbles popping in the joint. The exact cause of the sound is still not fully understood. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.